I'm Tom.
And I'm Denise. And we're Hopelessly Lost. This was a very special episode of Lost, kind of like Blossom. We've got 5 very special people who can see through both timelines in some way. Previously, Jack, Kate, Sawyer seemed to have some vague deja vu in the LA timeline, but now we have people who seem to have knowledge about both realities.
And it appears that love is stronger than time, and that's the thing that allows these people to see through the timelines.
It's beautiful. First, Charlie. In the LA timeline, Widmore sends his right-hand man, Desmond, to go get Charlie out of jail and make sure he's ready to perform with his son at his wife's benefit. Charlie is a junkie who wants nothing to do with Desmond, and he might even be suicidal, which makes sense if Charlie is aware of the other timeline and the one where he dies, right? But Charlie does tell Desmond the story of why he swallowed the drugs on the plane. When he was choking and dying, he says he had a vision of a beautiful woman with blonde hair and that he knew he felt true love. That's got to be clear, right?
You would think,
yeah.
Next you've got Desmond, and Desmond's a very complicated character in this whole thing. He spent this episode flipping back and forth between timelines, which is a whole deja vu thing in itself. In the LA timeline, Desmond is Widmore's right-hand man, and Widmore actually is nice to him, which is a complete turnabout from the other timeline. He's driving Charlie, and Charlie grabs the wheel, drives him off the end of the dock into the water. Desmond tries to save him. Charlie holds up his hand to the glass, and Desmond flashes to the other timeline where a dying Charlie held up his hand, and it said, "Not Penny's boat." In this LA timeline, Desmond doesn't know who Penny is, but he flashes to the other timeline where he does know who Penny is, the love of his life, and that would seem to be the
He's clearly struck by this vision of
he
Penny.
clearly is. Later he meets Penny. She's running on the very same stadium where Desmond met Jack in the LA or the island timeline. He touches her, shakes her hand, and immediately faints and jumps back to the other timeline.
Number 3, there's Charles Widmore.
Yes.
The Widmore of the island timeline seems kind of hell-bent on protecting that timeline.
Mm-hmm.
There's nothing to suggest that he's aware of the LA timeline, but he talks about how everything will be lost if Fake Lock is allowed to leave the island. So he clearly knows something else is out there. The Widmore in LA seems kind of oblivious to it all. He's much nicer to Desmond, as you mentioned, than I'm the island Widmore, but other than that, he's kind of the same bastard.
Yep.
One thing to point out is, we assume that he still had the history of being on the island back in the past at some point before the timelines diverged. Also, it's interesting that he seems to need Desmond in both timelines.
Okay, then there's Eloise and Daniel, and they're very complicated. Daniel's the paradox of this whole show. He, in the island timeline, he's the one who's figured it all out. He's the one who seems to understand the true nature of the island.
That's true, but in the island timeline, he hasn't been around since the bomb went off. Where did he go?
Don't complicate things. So in the LA timeline, he's this trust fund kid and a musician, and his name's Daniel Widmore, by the way, not Daniel Faraday. One day he sees this beautiful redhead, presumably that's Charlotte, and recognizes her as the love of his life, even though he'd never met her before. The love of his other life, presumably. He wakes up the next morning, draws out this extremely complicated physics equation, which he doesn't know physics. He's a piano player. So he seems to see that big picture, and he describes to Desmond how the equation talks about a massive energy release, something like setting off a nuclear bomb. And then Desmond says, "What, are you going to set off a nuclear bomb?" And he says, "I don't want to set off a nuclear bomb. I think I already did." And then there's Eloise, who's his mother.
All right. Who killed him in the 50s, by the way, even though he never would have traveled there in the LA timeline.
Stop confusing things. Okay, true, but that's a whole other episode. So Eloise is one character who clearly is above it all. She can see, she's clearly aware of more than one timeline. It's not clear which one she's favoring, but she tells Desmond that he can't meet Penny because he's not ready yet. She says, I want you to stop. It's a violation.
Yeah.
Violation of what? Who knows?
Yeah. In the end, the show, more than any other, seemed to point us toward a resolution for the whole story, which is a nice change of pace.
Yeah. How many times has there been a resolution clearly on the horizon, and then that's not it?
All right. It appears that in any case, there are two timelines, and only one of them can exist. Which one will win out? Who will get to decide? What happens to the other one?
Who the hell knows? But they've got a handful of episodes left to figure it out, so let's see where they go with this thing.
But see, Tom, I told you, you thought the other timeline had no purpose, and here it is.
In the end, maybe it doesn't. We'll see. But anyway, that's it for this week.
Follow at Jack Gax on Twitter, or become a fan of Jack Jacksonville on Facebook. Until next week,
We're hopelessly lost.